Okay, let's call this meeting to order, and let's begin with roll call. Amy? Here?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Good morning to everybody. I want to welcome you to the May meeting of the Board of Regents here on the beautiful campus of Flathead Valley Community College. Thank you, President Karras, and your Board of Trustees and your entire staff for hosting us for the next couple of days. This is always an exciting time in the MUS at the conclusion of another successful academic year. We have just completed commencement ceremonies across the state, and the air of student achievement and success is so tangible at this time of year. To our students and faculty and staff and administrators across the Montana University system, thank you for your great work this year. The board has a very substantive business agenda over the next couple of days that will impact students and Montana residents in many ways. In the order in which they appear on the agenda, these items include the following. The board's two-year education committee will receive and review reports on 3 programs that are key to college affordability and student success. These programs are dual credit, math pathways, and Ed Ready. We'll hear more about them shortly. The administration and budget committee will be recommending tuition and fee rates and the institutional performance funding model for the coming biennium. That committee will also be considering the allocation of state funding to the units of the Montana University system. All of these items are vital to college affordability and helping students graduate on time. The Staff and Compensation Committee will hear a presentation from the spokesman of the Coalition of Union Faculty on the subject of faculty salary levels. Following that, the committee will discuss legislative action that affects compensation and some pay considerations for the next couple of years. Finally, the Academic and Student Affairs Committee will be recommending a policy for an exciting new state-funded scholarship program. The Montana STEM Scholarship Program will provide Montana students with new opportunities for financial assistance in science, technology, engineering, math, and healthcare degree programs. The committee will also be recommending a policy to implement a new federal law that will assist certain military veterans make higher education more affordable. The policy will ensure that certain veterans who are not resident Montanans will qualify for the equivalent of in-state tuition at our colleges and universities. As you can see, we're looking at a meaningful business session over the next couple of days, which illustrates great achievement and exciting times for Montana students, families, and employers. Before we begin our committee work, however, we will first hear from distinguished educational leaders and honored guests this morning. President Karras of Flathead Valley Community College has some words of welcome, which will be followed by remarks from the Office of Public Instruction and Governor Bullock's office. That will be followed by a report from Commissioner Christian on a number of items, including, importantly, the outcome of the 2015 legislature and what it means for the Montana University system. And so with that, President Karras, thank you for hosting this meeting once again and for your hospitality. The floor is yours.
Welcome all of you to Flathead Valley Community College, and we're so glad you could join us for a couple of days on some beautiful weather that we're having, although we do need the rain, but we hope it holds off while you're here. And we're sorry you can't see the view, but we know nobody would pay any attention at the meeting if those shades were open. I'm completing my 14th year here as president of Flathead Valley Community College and 16th year here, and it's been my great pleasure to work with a wonderful elected board of trustees who have the vision and direction for the college, and several of them are here with us today. I just wanted to introduce them, and you'll meet more of them this evening, but our chair, Bob Nystuen, is sitting in the back. Mark Holston and Shannon Lund are 3 of our trustees who've joined us for a while today, so I wanted to introduce them. All of these buildings that you see, except for one, have been funded with local taxpayer dollars, and we have one, our new nursing and health science building that we opened just barely 2 years ago, was funded with private funds from this community. We've seen many changes here over the years, and we've continued to meet community needs. As a community college, our goal is to meet our local community needs, and we're tied directly into our community. As most people in the Valley know, I can talk for hours about the college, but you only gave me 10 minutes, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the things we do. And first, I want to acknowledge our outstanding faculty and staff, all of whom chosen to be here and work here and live in this beautiful place. So we have probably some of the best faculty anywhere, I'd say, in the country, but they're here because they want to be here. I also want to introduce our new Vice President of Instruction and Student Services, who's not a new face to many of you, but Dr. Brad Eldridge has joined us as Vice President of Instruction and Student Services about a month ago. We're very pleased to have him in that position. I want to thank all of our staff who worked hard to put this meeting together and make sure it runs smoothly for you as well. About 50% of our students are part-time, and so we serve not just the FTE, as we all talk about FTE, how many FTE do you have, but at a community college or a two-year college, it may take 2 or 3 students to make up that 1 FTE, and that means that all of those students, those 3 heads that might make up 1 FTE, all need to see an advisor. They all need to see somebody for financial aid. So we're serving more heads than actually FTE. The average age of our students, about 55% of our students are traditional age right out of high school, and 45% are non-traditional. 50% of our students work. They're part-time. They work while they're in college. And I want to share with you some stories about our students who couldn't be here. We had over 400 graduates on Friday. Some of the students I'll talk to you about are students who graduated. Some are going to be here next year. Rosanna Stanfield's one of our outstanding students. Her father died several years ago and left 8 children behind. She worked 4 jobs this year so that she can complete her education. She had a full-time load. She was a full-time student, and she served as student government president. Nick Glinos, another student of ours, started his life as what he calls a ski bum. Couldn't decide what to do, didn't think education would provide anything for him. One day, as he said, he was driving a truck and the light bulb went on in his head. And he was the first in his family to ever go to college. He went on our study abroad trip to Costa Rica with our botany faculty member this winter. And he really got hooked on botany and what it could do for improving human life. And now he's in our honors program. He'll be spending this summer doing an internship at Rutgers University studying botany, and then he'll be back to complete another year with us before he goes on. Zoe Glasser-Breeding just graduated last week. She was one of our biotechnology students. She's done cyanobacteria research while she's been here. She has presented her research across the country and won awards. She spent last summer for a month in Brazil in our study abroad program in Brazil, teaching English and leadership skills to poor Brazilian students. Next year, she'll be studying with the Congress Bundestag exchange in Germany, where only 75 students from the United States are able to do that. And then she'll be going on to finish her education at Wellesley College. Jessie Blanc and Lindsay Andrachek are non-traditional mothers who are in our honors college. They did not have to leave their homes or their families to get an education. They were able to get in an honor college. They received a study and travel grant to study poverty. Both had been homeless earlier in their lives, so it was something that was very near and dear to their hearts. So I could go on and on telling you about all of our great students and the wonderful things they're doing, but I want to share with you some of the things that we do here and how we help those students be successful. So I'll give you a quick overview of what we do here at FECC. 40% of our students this year are in our career and technical education programs. They all go directly into the workforce, either with a certificate or associate of applied science degree. We have programs including advanced manufacturing, and that curriculum was developed by our local employers, not by us, and then told to the employers how it would work, but we actually brought the employers in and had them develop the curriculum. We've just created a Center for Manufacturing Excellence to work with local employers. We have an outstanding goldsmithing program, surveying, heavy equipment, welding, all of the programs that you hear about at many of the other two-year colleges. We have an outstanding culinary arts program, so hopefully you've signed up for dinner tonight, and you'll be able to join us for that. Our nursing program, we have both a practical nurse and associate of science degree in nursing. Our last class of associate of science nurses just received a 100% pass rate on the national licensing exam. Our surge tech students, we have a surgery technology program. We just heard yesterday that all 100% of those students passed the national licensing exam as well. So those are outstanding pass rates, and we're very proud of our faculty and our students who work so hard to get there. We also offer the Associate of Arts and Associate of Science transfer degrees. We have many, many programs that articulate into the university system, as well as students who go on to places like Stanford and Johns Hopkins, Columbia University, Amherst, and all of our credits transfer. Our biotechnology program is outstanding. Our chemistry program also allows students to do research. We have those online courses as well with some very innovative methods for students to learn in a number of different modalities. Our science, technology, engineering, and math faculty actually hold a STEM colloquium every Friday for students to share their research, or for other faculty or visiting scholars to share their research with everybody on campus. We had 2 of our graduates come back, actually 3 this past year, to talk to our students. First, Captain Jason Curtis, who was one of the captains on the Thunderbirds, was here earlier at the very beginning of the semester last fall. And he talked to the high school students, and he came here and talked about his start at FECC and what a great way it was to launch him into the sky. And then Dr. Sarah Rugheimer, who was one of our outstanding students as well, began her education at FECC and was a physics major, and went on to get her bachelor's degree in Calgary, and she just completed her PhD in astrophysics from Harvard University and came back to talk to our students about starting at FECC. You can literally go anywhere, and that they should all reach for the stars. And then Andrew Crawford, who is another one of our students who graduated about 4 years ago, had been a snowboarder, a professional snowboarder, traveled around the world for many years, and decided after breaking over 35 bones in his body, maybe there was a different way to make a living. Came back to school here, started his education at FECC again. He had dropped out of college after starting 1 semester. Got very interested in aerospace engineering, competed in a NASA competition, won first place nationally, got flown to Houston, competed in that competition. He and his team won first place there. He spent a summer doing an internship in Pasadena at NASA, came back, finished his education here, went to MSU's engineering program, graduated, did a number of different things, and now he's working for Google X on the self-drive car, and he was our commencement speaker on Friday, and not only was he a great speaker, he gave this great multimedia presentation, so the students really enjoyed that. We have a wonderful honors college, and I need to thank both MSU and U of M for all of their support with that. We've worked very closely, and our students who are in our honors college can seamlessly transfer to either U of M or MSU's honors college, and it's been a great opportunity for students who can't leave the Valley or don't want to leave the Valley to get an honors education right here. We have an excellent study abroad program where we've really expanded that because we know in today's global economy it's so important for students to understand what happens in the world, because as you all know, what happens in Greece or what happens in France or Italy or England impacts all of us here, China. And so we live in a very isolated part of Montana, a very beautiful place, but often our students haven't ever been out of the Flathead Valley, and many of them have never even been to Glacier Park, as close as it is to us. So finding a way to provide them that opportunity to have that global experience. We've expanded our study abroad. We have a semester abroad in Venice where students study Italian art and theater, and they live in Venice. We have the US-Brazil Connect program where students spend a semester working with Brazilian students using Google Chat and some other social media means, and then they spend a month in Brazil working with those students, many poor students in very impoverished areas in Brazil, helping them learn English and leadership skills. We will have our 3rd Fulbright in Residence, Scholar in Residence this fall, and for a community college, that's pretty unique. We had a Chinese Scholar in Residence about 5 years ago, and then we had an Aboriginal artist from New Zealand who was here a couple of years ago, and this year we'll have another Chinese Scholar in Residence who will be teaching Mandarin and international business for us. We continue to expand our opportunities for our students because we have many students who come here needing developmental education, whether it's in math or English. We've looked at ways to change and be more innovative in math, as many of our peers have. We're also doing the same thing in English. We have a co-requisite program in writing now where students take the developmental writing class at the same time they're taking the entry level, the freshman level writing class, so they're able to do better and do so more quickly without having to have a semester or a year of developmental classes before they can even get to college level classes. We also offer the Hiset and adult basic education. We run that program here at the college. We serve veteran students, and thanks to a grant from the Commissioner's Office through the Board of Regents and the legislature, we were able to restructure a facility or an area to create a veteran center for our veteran students, and that's been very successful this past year. Partnerships are key to our success. Certainly our K-12 partnerships here in Flathead and Lincoln counties, which is our major service area. The partnerships with all of our high schools has been great. We have a running START program, the dual enrollment program, where high school students get high school and college credit. Our board several years ago decided that As low as our tuition and fees were, 50% of that, for many high school students, because financial aid wasn't accessible, they just didn't have the opportunity to take those college classes, and the research does show that high school students who complete or begin college with 6 college credits are more likely to complete faster and better than students who don't. They wanted to provide that opportunity to all high school students, so they decided that any high school student in Flathead or Lincoln County in our service region can get 6 credits for no tuition or fees here at FECC, and that's really made a huge difference in the lives of our students. We had more than 400 high school students this spring taking college classes through FECC. One such student, high school senior Coulter Norick from Columbia Falls, completed his high school degree with 21 credits from Flathead Valley Community College, and he'll be starting Duke University this fall, so we're very proud of Coulter. We're also offering, for the second year this summer, the summer experience. So for high school students who are interested, they can take a 3-credit class. We provide them lunch and then an activity after lunch, whether it's career exploration, intramurals, or service learning, some volunteer work that they must do. Those 3 credits aren't charged to them either, and so for high school students, there's an opportunity to actually get 9 credits at no cost. Our partnerships with higher education, the university system, are critical to us. Many of our students go on to U of M and MSU Billings and Northern and Western, so we see students and tech students go everywhere around the state. We have a number of partnerships, the 2+2+2 in business. MSU Billings offers the second 2 years for a baccalaureate degree, and U of M offers the MBA, and students can seamlessly go through that program. That's just one example. But we're especially grateful to the business and industry partners here in Flathead Valley, because without them, we would not have the facilities and the equipment and the opportunities we have to provide the education we do to the students who live here and the people in this valley who might not be able to get an education without the opportunities we provide. Our business and industry partners assist us with programs, with curriculum, with equipment. They've just been phenomenal. And I know many of you know I was chair of the National Association of Community Colleges 2 years ago and past chair this past year. And so having been on that board for 5 years and spent a lot of time at national meetings and talking to presidents from all over the country and visiting a lot of community colleges, I can say that other colleges may have more funding, they may have more students, they may have more technology. I know they don't have a better view, but may have a lot of other things that we don't have, but the other thing I know that we have that they don't have is the community support. I've never seen another college with the kind of community support we have here at Flathead Valley Community College, and we really appreciate the support of our community and the great trustees that lead us. So thank you for your time. Welcome to FECC. I know you'll enjoy your time here.
Thank you, President Karras, very much. We look forward to our time here in the beautiful Flathead. Thank you. We're now going to turn the podium over to Mr. Steve York from the Office of Public Instruction, who is here on behalf of Superintendent Juneau. Welcome.
Chairman Toss and members of the board and educational leaders, it's just an honor to be here. The last time that I stood before a committee and introduced myself, it was to a legislative committee, and they weren't necessarily all friendly. So please accept greetings and best wishes from Superintendent Juneau. You know, it is always good to see the legislative session come to an end, and it was really a pretty good session for K-12 education. We had wins and we had losses, but the story of this session wasn't so much about what happened to us, it's what didn't happen to us. And we feel successful in blocking some things that we thought would be damaging to public education in Montana. Our job now is to educate our districts on changes and made by the legislature and continue to support and improve what we have as a great public education system. And we see our relationship with our post-secondary partners in Montana as healthy and productive. I'd venture to say that the level of cooperative work in which we engage with the Montana University system rivals any other state in the nation. And I know this from what I have been told when I'm on the road and all the great comments about how do you guys manage to find a way to work together. And we do. We're proud of this and we appreciate your level of cooperation. As I was thinking about what I wanted to say today, I started to contemplate just the different ways that we work together. So I'm going to go down in the weeds a little bit. And yesterday I spent about 20 minutes at my desk writing down things I know we've done cooperatively. And I'm going to run through these. This is more about quantity than quality, although these are all very, very good things. So, Big Sky Pathways is a joint venture between the two-year schools and our OPI's current technical education unit. I think it's the future. Adult basic education, which now requires students completing high school equivalency programs to have a plan for transition to training beyond the certificate. We host the Veterans Ed, which certifies post-secondary programs allowing veterans to utilize education benefits at institutions of higher learning. We work with the Department of Labor and Montana University System on the Montana Career Information System. Graduation Matters and College Application Week is connected with that, and Gear Up. We've been involved in the rethinking of developmental ed. We've had an opportunity to sit at the table with that. We have a position on the Montana College Access Network. The training of our teen driving safety instructors at Montana State University Northern. The hosting of MSU dietitian interns in our school foods program. UM's hosting the unbelievably successful Digital Academy, which includes the promising Ed Ready program that you'll hear about later. The Gear Up sponsored ACT testing for all students. The successful and growing dual enrollment program. Construction of electronic transcripts, which is going to make all of our lives easier as we move along. The addition of FAFSA information to our GEMS statewide data system. And of course, we have a tremendously cooperative relationship with our schools of education and prepare our educators for the future. Our relationship with the Council of Deans and Higher Education Consortium is on solid ground. Beyond preparing educators for specific fields, the education prep programs have been actively involved in our state consortium for educator effectiveness, development and implementation of the Montana Educators Performance Appraisal System, the development of school accreditation standards, teacher and leader prep standards, and licensure rules, and this includes initial education licensure recommendations from our universities and colleges for new educators, cooperation in training teacher candidates as well as practicing teachers in the field on the implementation of the Montana core standards, exposure of teachers in preparation programs to the Montana's nationally and internationally recognized Indian Education for All effort, Montana's ongoing relationship with Montana University System for the purpose of training teachers in the field of special education, including cooperative grant that we have from the Cedar Center that's designed to improve programs in meeting the needs of special education teachers and prep teachers through the state. We also have ongoing financial support to areas of high need positions that we offer and sponsor for school psychology, speech and language pathology, which are in great need in our state. Development of the teaching standards and practices in early childhood education with the governor's office and MUS. Well, I know that I could go on. That's what I was able to pull out of this mind that's not always remembering things at this age in about 20 minutes. I know there's a lot more. Obviously, we are doing some great things, as you can see. And this does not even include the examples of what's going on at the local level, such as President Karras mentioned about her program this summer with high school students. There are fabulous things going on between the colleges and the local schools. This is strictly what's happening at the state level. So we thank you for that cooperation. We find it important. And I want to end with just a little story to tell you all what great things are happening in Montana education. In the U.S. and throughout the world, as a matter of fact, robotics has grown into a giant educational event. Robotics teams require skills in STEM, business, cooperative skills, critical thinking, and leadership skills. Participation in an honor robotics team is an eye-opener for corporations like Microsoft and Boeing. I was told by executives that that is a screen-out element in Washington for incoming IT positions. They look at that and been on a robotics team. About 30,000 kids in Washington participate in robotics on thousands of teams, or hundreds and thousands of teams. In fact, last year in one robotics area, there were 4,500 teams in the nation and in the world. And I tell you this because we have some teams in Montana. Not very many. We could use a lot more. But they actually compete down to the level of going to a world championship. They go with state competitions, then regional, and finally on to the national world championship, which is held in St. Louis. And I'd like to announce that Sun River High School, it's a little town just outside of Great Falls, with some help from Fairfield up the road, is the reigning world champion. That little high school won the world championship. Folks, this is impressive, and it really is in line with what we need to do educationally to help our students be ready for these upcoming challenges they have in our economy. So we're really happy with the cooperation. We know that a P20 system requires good cooperation to be successful, and we want to make sure that we continue this cooperation. And thank you for your service and your time and what you do for education in Montana.
Mr. York, thank you very much. And please extend that thank you to Superintendent Juneau and her entire staff. I couldn't agree more. It's a wonderful partnership that we have here in Montana. Thank you for your service. I'd like to turn the floor over now to Dr. Dean O'Brien. Is that, what do we call you now? Soon to be Dean O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien, thank you for being here one more time on behalf of Governor Bullock, and thank you for the wonderful partnership that we have with you. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's a great honor to be here, and I send my well wishes from the governor, and he is, as always, very grateful for your service and your hard work. And you know, in particular, I know I don't have to tell you this, that Mr. York just shared with us the extensive partnerships that your commissioner and his cabinet and office and campuses, the work that's done to collaborate to reach the needs of the students is really tremendous. And it goes beyond just the K-12 world, very much into private industry. The cooperation and collaboration with the Main Street Montana project continues well. And multiple agencies are Commissioner Pam Busey of Department of Labor and Industry, and many other organizations. It's truly remarkable, and it's really exciting to see as we move forward. Just a couple of highlights. As was pointed out, there was a legislative session, and you'll probably be hearing more about that. And Governor Bullock explained to us before the session started that, yes, there would be a session, but there was also a state to run and state business to take care of. So there are some things that I'll be including in this report. The governor does take over at the end of next month as the national chair of the Education Commission of the States. And if you're not familiar with that organization, I might encourage all of you to just be aware. Education Commission of the States has a phenomenal database of education policy, actually nationally and internationally, that we have found helpful in the governor's office and might be of assistance to learn best practices that are happening nationally. It's a meta-analysis of current research. And then we have been very excited about the work of the commissioner and his office with college affordability and ensuring through the legislative session that tuition is available, funding is available to maintain that freeze. and kept affordable. The creation of the STEM scholarship, the Governor's STEM scholarship, which you'll hear more about for graduating seniors and on to the next year. The concept of performance-based, where students are able to earn or essentially earn more their second year. It's a $1,000 scholarship their first year if they're eligible, and if they reach certain criteria, then they're eligible for another $2,000. So that concept of performance-based at the student level is there as well, and you'll hear more about that. And then also kudos to the veterans initiatives to help that college affordability. That those are challenges, budget challenges that are applauded, and opportunities that the governor was very delighted to sign a bill to protect students from debt, that they would be able to maintain their licenses and keep their jobs oftentimes, even if they were going through challenging times with repaying their debt. The governor is very thrilled with the progress that the Montana University system is making in dual enrollment. This is a critical piece for the Complete College Montana initiative and helping increase and push the needle for college completion in his goal for moving to 60% completion. And then we're also very excited about some of the work that is taking place in Indian country. I have submitted to you all the, literally hot off the press, this is yesterday, this came out in the first round, the Tribal Relations Report, the State Tribal Relations Report. And there's a section on education in this report, and I just wanted to share with you that Gear Up and the TRIO programs, Upward Bound, Student Support Services is highlighted in here. And those are great programs under your roof that you are overseeing that really are making a difference in students' lives and helping them bridge that gap as they overcome their challenges and become successful in post-secondary, in secondary education and post-secondary education. As far as K-12 goes, the governor was thrilled to sign a bully-free Montana bill that was in collaboration or at the leadership of the superintendent of public instruction, and also an additional funding for career and technical education. $2 million was passed through the legislature to support that. The governor, obviously, although Early Edge, his preschool initiative, was not funded, Governor Bullock remains committed to continuing to support early childhood, high-quality early childhood care and support, and the post-secondary units and institutions throughout the system have just done great in educating others and finding ways to build upon our high-quality system within the state. There are lots of other things that have been taking place. Most recently, we have expansion of Job for Montana's graduates, which is a career and education and post-secondary education, career and college education preparation program that is throughout the state. We've got over 50 high schools that provide this opportunity for students. And we are looking at expanding that to potentially as high as 100 schools throughout the state. And we have, it targets students who could use it as decided by the school teachers and counselors and administrators. And with those students who are in that Job for Montana's graduates program, there's a national affiliate, Job for America's graduates. We see about a 98% graduation rate. So we're really excited about moving that forward and working with some of the colleges and universities throughout the state. I'm happy to take any questions if you have them, but otherwise, thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. O'Brien. Any questions for Dr. O'Brien? Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your report. Thank Governor Bullock It was a good session for Governor Bullock and the Montana University system. Thank you very much. We are now at that point when we will approve the minutes of the March 5th and 6th Board of Regents meeting. Is there a motion? Regent Albrecht has moved. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. Campus introductions. I would turn to, Commissioner, do you want to do some introductions?
I would like to do some introductions. First thing I'd like to say is reluctantly not here today, but nonetheless importantly not here today, President Cruzado, notably missing. Her daughter is expecting and likely to deliver today, and so she is with her daughter today, and we very much encouraged her to do that and welcome Martha to the table in her place. And President Engstrom also said he would cover for the President Cruzado if she needed any help. I'd like to make an introduction, I guess, and then a few announcements to your OCHI staff. We have added a new and very capable person for a research director. We'll be handling primarily here in the beginning the implementation of research money that we received in the legislative session, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. But Janelle Booth joins us. She worked for MSU Extension, where we stole her. Got her master's in Bozeman, and actually while getting her master's worked as a lobbyist for us in the 2013 session, I believe. So we're glad to have her on board. Please welcome Janelle. So we also have a few departures that I would like to make mention to. Starting with one that is very close to me. You know, sometimes as you all know by now, working as a board member, you get pretty close to some staff members that you spend a lot of time with. I spent most of my time on the board, I think 5 years or so, as chair of budget. So I work closely with Mr. Robinson, but Mr. Robinson has decided after 10 years at the Commissioner's office that he is at that spot in life, I guess. Mick brought some incredible experience to the job. He obviously started a career at Carroll College, was a tenured faculty at Carroll. Many people don't know that. Worked as a private sector public accountant, was chief of staff and budget director for Mark Roscoe, and then came to us and has done an incredible job leading budget finance, worked as chief of staff, I think the entire time that he's been there. Mick will be retiring at the end of this year, and we are very supportive of that, but we'll miss him dearly in the Commissioner's office, and it's time to make the announcement. So Mick, congratulations on your retirement, and look forward to you being here the remainder of the year. We also have 3 other departures which need mention, and I will just tell you we're going to spend some more time on this piece of it at the reception this evening, and there will be a time for them to say a word and us to say a few words too. But we do have the peculiar situation of having 3 board members that this will be their last meeting. Student Regent Mariah Williams will be ending her term. Major Robinson is announced that he will be taking on some new and grand opportunities far south of us, but ones that he's very excited for. And I told Major when he called and told me, every time he's talked about his experience in the past of getting to work at for one of the companies on an amusement park, it's brought a smile to his face, and he gets to rejoin that effort with Universal Studios in Florida. So we wish him well on that venture too, and this will be Major's last meeting. And then finally, the good and honorable Regent Mayor, MUS accountant, Regent Kraus, is also finishing his term. He served the remainder of my term, and I think did an incredibly good job. But has served us very well. His term is up, and so likely will be moving on as well. So we're going to have some time to discuss those at the reception, but I wanted to make mention of them here this morning. So wish all three of you the very best, and thank you for your incredible service to the board and to the students of Montana. Mr. Chair, I believe that's our list.
I believe we have some additional campus introductions, perhaps. President Engstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Good morning. I do have an announcement, and then I'll ask Chancellor Weatherby to make an announcement as well. But you already let the cat out of the bag, and I wanted to announce the transition, I guess you'd say, of Dr. Shannon O'Brien to the position of Dean of the Missoula College. Shannon, as you know, has been the governor's education advisor, and we conducted a national search for the new dean of the Missoula College and brought to campus several excellent finalists. It was a very good pool, and in the end, the committee, which was led by Chris Comer, Dean of our College of Humanities and Sciences, put forth a slate of finalists that they felt would make excellent deans, and we selected Shannon O'Brien to be the next dean of Missoula College. We're so pleased with her energy, her creativity, her vision for the college that she demonstrated during the interview process, not to mention the extensive experience and knowledge that she has of higher education, having served in the role that she is completing now these last few years. So would you join me in welcoming Dean O'Brien to the Missoula College? And I would like to, at the same time, thank Dean Jane Baker, who is sitting over there. Jane has served as our interim dean during this past year and has done just a fabulous job. We've enjoyed having you, Jane, and maybe now we'll let you actually retire for real, since you have this pattern of going from position to position. So thank you, Jane, for your good work. And if I could call on Chancellor Weatherby, please, from Western, to make a couple of announcements.
Good morning, everyone. I have 2 Montana Western milestones to share with you this morning. And the first is that our interim assistant provost and dean of the School of Outreach, Annalise Ripley, is now Dr. Annalise Ripley. And she just went through commencement at the University of Montana Saturday. So congratulations. And second, I'd like you all to join me and all of the faculty and staff at Montana Western in celebrating the extraordinary service of Dr. Carl Ulrich as our provost. Carl has served as provost for 19 years, and anyone who's been a provost knows that that is just unbelievable. It's arguably one of the most difficult, challenging positions on any campus. And those 2 decades were not just any 2 decades. Those were the decades when Carl, working with people like Dr. Ripley and Vice Chancellor Briggs, not only took the campus from offering primarily education degrees to the whole range of majors that we have now and all of those opportunities for our students. And then second, of course, the incredible transformation to Experience One, experiential learning delivered in the block system. And if all of you who are in the offices and in the trenches on the campuses know that to transform a university in every aspect that deeply took incredible diligence, persistence, and courage. Vice Chancellor Briggs likes to call Carl the architect of the future of Montana Western, and I totally concur in that. And in addition to all of that, he has kept his wonderful, dry but wicked sense of humor. And so please join me in celebrating Dr. Carl Ulrich. He is going back to the biology program, fortunately not leaving Western. His colleagues are extremely happy to welcome him back to biology. And the outpouring of warm, respectful, and loving emails that came through at this announcement was just amazing. So, Carl, thank you for everything, and would you please join me in thanking Carl?
Additional introductions? Yes.
I'd like to introduce our interim provost, Bill Shields. This is his first, and it will be his last meeting. We don't do this often, so we have to say welcome and goodbye at the same time. Bill has joined us and really come back to Montana. He's a native Montanan and a graduate of Carroll College, and he served for, I believe, 10 years at the University of Great Falls, what was then the College of Great Falls. As we have gone through the search process and identified our new provost, the people on campus have continually come to me and said, is there a way we can keep Bill? He's only been with us now 2 months, but has really made a major impact on our campus. And I can't say thank you enough, first for joining us, but for your time and what you've done for us. So thanks a lot, Bill.
Are there further introductions from any of the campuses? Are there further introductions? Regent Williams?
So I'd like to invite the outgoing Montana Associated Students Executive Committee and the incoming Montana Associated Students Executive Committee up so that they could be introduced. And I think outgoing President Asa Holman was going to be introducing them. They held their elections last night.
Mr. Chair, Regent Williams, members of the board, thank you for having us today. My name is Asa Holman. I'm the outgoing president of the Montana Associated Students, and I'm going to introduce the incoming executive team. And actually, I'm also just going to have everybody who's an incoming member of MAS or outgoing member of MAS just stand up for a moment, please. Some of them are out in the hallway as well, since it's crowded in here, but. So thanks, everybody, for coming in this year. So transitioning out are myself, my Vice President, Sean McQuillan, who couldn't be here today because he started his new job, and behind me, Kirsty McPherson, Vice President, and also transitioning out and transitioning back in is Geraldine Blackwell from Great Falls, who is the Treasurer of MAS. We have Sonia Chariki. She is the incoming President of MAS from Billings. We have Ted Nesmith. He is the incoming Vice President for External Affairs from Great Falls. And we have Delaney Hansen coming to us from Western, and she will be the Vice President for Internal Affairs. Thanks.
Thank you all for being here. What a wonderful representation of our customers. Thank you all for being here. That's great. Further introductions by anybody? Further introductions, seeing none. Commissioner Christian, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for your report.
All right, before we start, though, I have failed to mention that our own student regent, Mariah, also received her MBA last weekend as part of the ceremony, so congratulations. Making us proud, one student at a time. All right, we're going to talk about legislative overview. I certainly hope we don't spend an hour and a half on this, but we do have a little bit of ground to cover. I'm going to give you somewhat of an overview, and then Tyler will give you a few more details along the way. So I don't think you can start the overview without a few thank yous, and so I want to get right to that, starting with Governor Bullock, who made these opportunities available to us. I think without having those things in the budget to start with, we would have never ended up with those things in the end. For those of you that haven't been through the process, it is incredibly rare that things get added along the way. It's usually the other way around, especially when there's a somewhat conservative majority in control. That's sort of the name of the game. And so the opportunities that were available to us were made so by Governor Bullock and his staff, and that of Dan Villas in the budget office. I think our office worked hard over the last summer with the budget office to make sure the numbers lined up. Mick Robinson carries a lot of weight on that, going back and forth with the various departments over there to make sure that we start in a place that we can live with. I was thinking about this morning on how a legislative session works. It reminded me when I was a kid, we decided that it made sense to have a marble fight. And we did so with slingshots. So it was a pretty good thing, with the exception that we did it inside. And one of the tragedies of war was a marble creamed off the couch and went through the fish tank. And it reminds me of a legislative session, because then there's a hole in the fish tank and everything's spilling out, and there's little minnows and all the things on the floor, and you're trying to figure out which ones to pick up and put back in the tank, and hopefully the flow out of the tank will stop at some point and you can save a few of them along the way. And that's sort of what that 90-day session is like in a lot of ways. And so, you know, it matters what's in the tank when we start, and that is a great credit to Governor Bullock and his team. And then it sort of matters what we do along the way and which pieces we try to pick up and throw back in, and where we go from there. So I also want to thank the team that represented you there day in and day out, doing the majority of that work. That includes from our office, Tyler Trevor, Kevin McCrae, and Mick Robinson, pulling the majority of that weight. Certainly your other deputies help along the way. And also Tracy Ellick and Bill Johnston from the two campuses have a very bright role in that. Those guys are there every day, working day in and day out to try to see that we keep as many fish in that tank as we possibly can. There's also a number of other groups that participated, and I want to quickly thank them, starting with the student lobby group. We had three great individuals there, Harry, Garrett, and Mike from the various campuses. We also had at various times, the presidents were there. I believe all the chancellors were there at different times, not only working in Helena, but also working at their home communities every day to try to make sure the university system could fare as well as possible. So I want to thank all of those individuals for an incredibly arduous but successful, I think it was 87 days when we finally called it a wrap. So thank you to all those guys. So the session, I guess just for a quick overview, you know, I believe it was a very strong session for higher education. I think as rankings would go, probably with some of the infrastructure that we got in the last session, it will remain the high water mark for now, but this session probably was next in line behind that in terms of total dollars available, total new dollars available to the Montana University system. About $50 million of base and OTO money came into our budget. Those are incredibly good resources from the state. We also had money that flowed in the what ultimately became the pay plan. And that leads to what was mentioned earlier by Dr. O'Brien, to this conversation that we started a year and a half ago on tuition freeze. And while I think tuition freeze is a good soundbite, and there certainly is some accuracy to the term tuition freeze, I don't think it explains the whole story by a long shot. That freeze to some implies that there's also an expenditure freeze, that we've somehow capped the budget and said this is where everything shuts off, and that is far from accurate. In fact, the good news of this is really through the efforts of the governor and ultimately then our legislative partners, new resources flow into our budget, allowing us to increase our expenditures at an adequate level, and one that we designed, one that we asked for moving forward, by buying down what would otherwise be a tuition increase. And that ultimately leads to our ability to freeze tuition, but it's much different than sort of the notion that I think some gain from that as an overall freeze of expenditures. It's not an expenditure freeze, it's a tuition freeze. You know, I think I'll just go into that a little bit more is why I personally think that's a good thing and why I think it's bode very well for the university system. One of the things that it does is it sort of changes the mix, and when we've done this in the past, it changes the conversation during the legislative session. So for, these aren't the numbers, but for argument's sake, if we roll up from the campuses and have a budget request of $13 million, for example, what has happened in the past prior to these last 2 years of tuition freeze is the legislature would say, okay, well, that seems like a good request. Why don't we cut that back to about 10 million? And then from there, during the process, when we finally get to the bottom of the legislative hearings, they say, all right, now of that 10 million that's left, we traditionally pay about 40% of that, and students pay about 60% of that increase, and that's how it's been divided up in the past. And so the ultimate outcome of that prior to these cap years was then they would send us $4 million in this example, and we would be left to figure out what we're going to do with the rest. The good news about the cap agreement, the tuition agreement, has been that they, have not been quite as argumentative about our budget moving forward. That's part of the pledge. We worked through the budget office over the course of summer and come up with reasonable adjustments to our budgets. Basically, our budget came out of the session in terms of present law adjustments where our request went in, where they were in the governor's budget. In fact, this year we had the fortunate situation where it actually came in a little bit above that for some money that was added to extension. So the agreements allowed us to get a little less into the weeds on the dollars and cents, to go with the governor's office recommendation. That is part of the agreement that we made, is that it would be funded at the level that the governor proposed. And again, that level is something that we requested of the governor's office. And then instead of dividing that pie by what they refer to as state share, that 40% or what they've traditionally been paying, they've been dividing that pie based on our resident student population. So instead of 40%, we have about 80% residents, and they fund it at that level instead of the lesser amount. And so the combination of those two things means substantially more dollars into the MUS. And I think we were able to accomplish that again this year. Hopefully that example makes some sense. But it changes how it is split up, and it changes what part the state covers, and ultimately then the state is paying for what otherwise would have been a tuition increase. And just to be crystal clear on this, had the state not done what they did in this 2015 session, and we not received the funds that we did, to backfill that would have required about a 10% increase in each year of the biennium, 20% over the 2 years. So that is significant. The notion, I think, gets confused sometimes with what the word freeze means, and it leads people to other conclusions, but I think this is a fantastic day in the Montana University system, and it is truly some incredible funding that has flowed in the last 2 sessions to the system and added to our base for the long term, and that is a good thing. I think Tyler can get a bit more into the numbers if we want to help us explain that, but ultimately we got through the session where we hoped to get through the session, and I think where the board direction was for my office before, in very good shape. So a few other sort of high points, or what I believe are high points, what I just discussed in terms of present law adjustments, about $26 million in new base funding through general funds appropriation, and then some additional money on the pay plan. That's sort of the 2 buckets that we were looking for. We will have more on that later, and some of the committee work, budget and staff and comp. We had about $30 million of state appropriations to campuses that will be allocated through performance funding. As all of you know, over the last two sessions, one of the sort of bargains of this deal, which I believe brought more new dollars to the system than what was required to put into performance funding, but one of the bargains was that we would allocate a part of it to performance funding. And Tyler's led a group that includes a broad array of people from our office throughout the campuses to help develop that program. The pay plan, which we'll talk more about. We also received permanent funding, or at least base funding, for the WWAMI expansion that happened in the 13 session. So when we got 10 new WWAMI slots that were approved in 13, but those weren't fully loaded, so we had part of the cost of those that didn't come in that biennium, so we had to add it to this biennium, and all of that money was moved into base funding for us, which is a very good sign for the longevity of that program. Of course, we've talked about it along the way, and we'll talk more about it, but unprecedented state confidence and funding for us in the $15 million one-time only research funds that will be used for seed money to basically leverage more of a research enterprise in the Montana University system. We told the legislature that, one, we would try to do all we could to leverage these monies into more activity, more economic development, more job growth. The basis of this is, one, that we'll try to solve Montana problems, we'll try to create Montana jobs, and we will try to add to the Montana economy. And that's the investment mindset that they made, and truly unprecedented. The new scholarship program, which we'll get more into detail, Dr. O'Brien mentioned it as well. Have to give special thanks to Kevin McCrae. I honestly really didn't think he would get to where he got, but we were able to defeat the gun bill, which I think is a good thing for Montana campuses. I think we did so with some really reasonable arguments. We sort of got away from what's right, what's wrong, and just got practical. You know, one of the things that was used over and over in some of the proponent lines was that, well, other states are starting to do this. And the truth is, other states aren't starting to do this. Other states are actually starting to do something that resembles what we're already doing, which is allow students to bring guns to campus, check those guns in, access to them when they want to hunt, and sporting activities, and we'll continue to do that. But I think overall that was a good win for the campuses and those that work on the campuses and those students that attend. So great work was done there. We did table a proposed change to retire or make actuarially sound some piece of the retirement system. I won't get into the weeds too much, but that bill could have impacted us by about $11 million a year. And so we at least saved that argument for a later day. About $9 million in new state investment, plus $65 million of authority for infrastructure. Deferred maintenance, one of our requests that will go across the system. A&E will help prioritize projects, but there's $4.6 million there. The Mays, Montana Agriculture Experiment Stations, $2.4 million. Bitterroot College received authority only to ultimately purchase the facility that we're leasing currently if that opportunity comes along. Montana State University Engineering Building received $60 million worth of authority to move the Norm Asbjornson Center forward. We received state funding for a land acquisition in Great Falls to purchase the property next to the Great Falls campus, $750,000. We received an additional $1 million of funding and another $1 million, so $2 million total of authority for the MSU Northern Automotive Center, something that was important to getting that project done. So overall, I think it was an incredibly productive session for us. Probably the only sort of low point, I guess, if you will, is 416, a bill that had developed out of what originally started as House Bill 5, I guess, that was the bonding infrastructure bill that the governor had proposed. I think there was a bipartisan effort to pare that down a bit. The projects that we had requested in some fashion through our long-range building program remained in 416. Ultimately, pretty well covered by the media, so I don't suppose I need to go into it too much, but it had some bonding in it, so it required a 2/3 vote. It passed the Senate by 47 votes, I believe, and failed to pass the House by 66 votes, which we needed 67. So ultimately died by a narrow margin, but left us without some of the infrastructure projects that we were hopeful for, the Romney renovation, Clapp renovation, Billings library renovation, and the Montana Tech engineering building renovation. I think one of the things as we move forward, we'll have to sort of rebuild where we're going with long-range building, what our proposals will be for 2017. I think the legislature very much appreciated, in fact, left all of these projects in till the final buzzer, the fact that they were all renovations. They've encouraged us in past sessions not to expand the footage where we don't need to, and not to leave old buildings sort of in rundown condition where there's operation and maintenance that is high and utilization is low. And I think all of these projects fell either squarely in that bucket or had student safety issues that we were trying to address. And there was great support for that, and lots of compliments along the way for the items that we put forward. And I think I mention that because it's probably something that's reasonable for us to look at as we move forward with our long-range building plans. But overall, I think a very robust session. I think we ended up where we hoped to end up, with the exception of 416. And so that's probably where we wanted to be. Like I said, I think it probably will rank as the second largest sort of overall increase that the university system has seen. And so I think it was a very productive session. I would certainly answer some questions on that, or we can go. Tyler's got a bit more detail on a number of these fronts, including what happened with the new STEM scholarship and some of that. But any questions before we get to Tyler?
I have a question.
Regent Krause was waving.
Ladies first.
Thank you.
Regent Albrecht.
I'm curious, with the healthy balance that the governor has left behind, which is fantastic for our state, any discussion about a special session where these infrastructure projects could be discussed and perhaps renewed? Dr. O'Brien.
Mr. Chair, Regent Albrecht, I have no comment on that at this point in time.
Regent Krause.
Thank you. So one of the things that I sweated about in this session was our report about the performance funding, and maybe that'll be covered later, but you know, we had to report out the results from the performance funding and how we did, and I just wondered how that was received. You know, we spent a lot of time on that and took some heat for, you know, sort of involving the legislature in our business and all of that, and you're right, it did result in new funding for the campuses. And how did they like how we spent the new funds?
It's always dangerous to speak for others,
Yeah.
but I will tell you the feedback that we got both in subcommittee, and when we have very fortunate circumstance of having a great subcommittee. A lot of shifting on the committees this year, but we had the majority of who was on our subcommittee before back, chaired by Roy Hollinsworth, who was the chair before, and Vice Chair Lou Jones, two people we worked closely with 2 sessions ago. And through subcommittee, they were incredibly complimentary. We did spend a day on sort of that what we referred to as accountability and deliverable piece. Very impressed with what we had done and where we're going, and the implementation of not only performance funding, but really, I think, taking to heart sort of what's behind that driver in terms of retention, completion, time to degree, some of the things we talked about in the previous session, some of the things this board has spent an incredible amount of time concerned with and talking about. We demonstrated different areas that were making progress on that, and they were incredibly complimentary of the progress that we've made, encouraged us to continue on that path. One of the first comments from Vice Chair Senator Lou Jones was he had a list of sort of 5 things that he wanted to see us do, and all 5 things happened to be on the report that we were giving him that day. So it looked like it was almost set up. It was so perfectly served up for us. But the truth is, we are working on things. That's what's important to us. I think they view that as what's important to Montana students and their families. And then I guess the last thing I'd say is I think full appropriations was the committee that was a bit feared and revered this session. Just the makeup of it had changed a bit. The chair, Nancy Balance, representative from the Hamilton area, actually said in the hearing that she was glad to see the university system there, and that we were the only ones that had presented to her that were truly accountable for how we'd spent the money the session before. And that's a compliment I don't think we've ever received before. Something I truly didn't expect Chair Balance to say to us, but it felt good because I think it's what we're trying to do. We're doing what I believe the people of Montana want us to do as a board and a system. We're focused on the right things, not only what's important to higher education, but what's important to Montana, and I think that they recognize that, and that's truly a change in a very positive direction.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. I just, that's a lot of work by you and your staff, and a lot of work by committees from each campus, and meetings at each campus, and decision-making, that performance funding effort, and all the other efforts are made up of committees and volunteers and people who get involved. And they also have other jobs too. And the campuses have really stepped up, and it's flowed up to getting that kind of compliment, and my compliments to everyone concerned.
Additional questions? Regent Sheehy.
I recognize how difficult it is during a session, how busy you are. But as a regent, I would have appreciated more updates about what we were doing and what we were representing. I think we only had one sort of update of what was going on at the legislature. And both in order to provide input and because we get asked a lot what we're doing at the legislature in the future sessions, just something I would appreciate is a little more updating during the session.
Yeah, that great point, and we will do better at that for certain.
Thank you, Chair Tuss. I was curious, and perhaps if Ace is still here, I was wondering how your office interacted with the Student Senate and their participation and their lobbyists that came to speak as well. And I don't know if he's still here or not. He may have taken off. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regent, I didn't quite catch the question from back there.
My question was, I was just curious, either from you or from the Commissioner's office, how the interaction was between the student representation during the legislative session and the Commissioner's office.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Mr. Regent, I can't speak for the Commissioner's office, obviously, but from the students' perspective, the collaboration was fantastic. Both of the professional lobbyists from MUS and UM, just as they did last legislative session, spent a significant amount of time mentoring and teaching the student lobbyists and showing them how to effectively lobby, and just also the value of reaching out to the legislators and conveying to the legislature the value that higher ed has in their lives as students and for all students, really. So, and then specifically the commissioner's office is outstanding when the students are there. They give us a physical office space to work in, and they facilitate any type of office materials or phone lines or really anything that we need to be successful. So the collaboration from a student's perspective is fantastic.
Additional questions? Additional questions? I had a question about need-based aid. In the past, this board has been very interested in need-based aid for students in the Montana University system. Haven't heard a whole lot about that, and I'm trying to recall, frankly, in past bienniums, what, if anything, we've received from the state of Montana and how we fared this particular session on that score.
Yeah, Tyler can give us more details. Need-based aid, I mean, Montana has always been incredibly low. If I think we had some data once before, if we doubled need-based aid, we'd still be lower than the WICHE average, and if we quadrupled it, we'd still be lower than the national average. So we're incredibly low on need-based aid to start. One of the sort of peculiarities of the session, I guess, is that there's some, I mentioned sort of the dynamics in full approps, and there was some levels that they'd sort of agreed as a caucus that would get through full approps and some that weren't. And so part of the funding in the Baker grants and part of the funding in the governor's Best and Brightest was set aside, if you will, with the hopes of returning those in the Senate. And I do believe that there was every effort made to return those in the Senate, including the governor going to bat for those. But ultimately, just sort of the way sessions play out, about the time that was going through Senate Finance and Claims and back on the table for discussion, the Lavin bill, which we'll discuss, the STEM scholarship bill, gained a lot of momentum and a lot of bipartisan support. And I think there was a number of people that felt like that was a proper switch to move from the Baker grants and part of Best and Brightest. Ultimately, I think there was an effort made to get rid of Best and Brightest in its entirety. The governor argued for us successfully at the end to keep part of that, but I think in the minds of most legislators that supported that direction is they replaced Baker and Haig and some of Best and Brightest with this Lavin bill that we'll discuss. And they liked that in that it brings statutory investments, so it's not sort of up for grabs every year. It's tied to the lottery. Any excess proceeds will go to us, and I think ultimately it could mean more for us than what we had as OTO in the other pool of money. I don't know about the replacement aspect of it, though. I mean, it's one of the things that we sort of argued against because I'm not sure it's necessarily hitting the exact same students. I think is to the heart of your question. Baker and Haig went to need-based aid. These have sort of that performance piece to it, which is popular right now. They have the STEM piece. There's some performance benchmarks in there that you have to meet, and so. Though that might be a little different group of students, to be honest. So I think that in summary, we probably lost ground on need-based aid. Certainly didn't gain any. But, we probably gained some ground on overall scholarship dollars that will be available to our students. It's just going to be kind of interesting. We had a discussion on Tuesday at MSU about how those two bubbles will overlap. I don't know if we know yet. The data will drive that a little bit in the future. But I think when we get to the Lavin bill, Tyler's going to talk some about the details of that. It'll make a little more sense what they did. I think a lot of people feel like they helped us in that regard. And probably if you ask the rank and file, they would say that they helped us. And I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. I think it is a great opportunity for us. And there is new money and probably more money that will come in the Lavin-sponsored bill, but I'm not sure it's going to hit need-based quite as directly as the funding stream that was there before. So I don't know if the replacement is one-to-one or where we'll end up, but time will tell on that. And as we move to 17, session, we'll have to kind of shape an agenda around that as to how we want to address it.
Okay, thank you. Regent Johnstone?
Well, I mean, it seems to me that we've made the policy choice, either explicitly or implicitly, to keep tuition low in lieu of what most states have done, of increased tuition and then focused additional state funding on a need-based. And I think that's a legitimate discussion to have. But from a policy standpoint, I think that's the choice we've made, whether we've done it explicitly or implicitly.
Regent Robinson?
Chair Tess, I think it also needs to be mentioned too that I think if we don't keep those students or the potential students in mind too that do need that assistance, that don't fit into the categories that we're setting up, whether they be STEM related or otherwise, I think we start to lose our accessibility here in Montana too. And I would hope that, you know, as a board moving forward, and certainly depending on working with the governor's office, that continues to be a priority. It has been a priority to the board in the past. And I think I understand exactly what you're saying, commissioners, is that when you're literally in the trenches and you have a whole array of priorities that you're bringing to the table for higher education, some rise up and some drop away. But I think this is one I think that we need to keep in mind, and I would hope that the board would keep in mind moving forward for preparing this next budget, preparing for this next session, because I think that we do lose the ability to be as accessible as we'd like to be and to be as diverse as we'd like to as well.
Regent Krause?
Thank you. So it's been an interesting strategy. I think it has been a strategy, a deliberate strategy, Regent Johnstone, to this tuition freeze idea. It is such a major thing, and there's, we get demonstrations. I attended one on campus, and people respond to that. And it has resulted, as I think the commissioner said, in these high water marks for state funding in the modern era. The way I think we look for how we fund and I'll say it this way because I think that there's research out there that says these students really perform well. That disadvantaged C student, right? The one that should go to school, but his high school or her high school career has been tough. Is to carve out more in the performance funding piece, right? Is to make sure it is an emphasis from this board to, and dollars go with that, and your performance, the way that the university system performs to reach out to those students and get those students and see that they succeed will be how you can combine both of those ideas into what it is we're trying to do, is to make that a point of emphasis. And it is in there, but it may not be at the top right now. So it is one of the ways I think that we can really combine both the glamour, if you will, of a tuition freeze and the practicality of making sure we have affordability at the same time.
Commissioner?
Well, if I can, we'll jump around here just a little bit. In the other section of this, we'll come back and we can get a little more into detail on the piece, but it's really kind of germane to what we're talking about. In the other, I was going to touch on just a few things that happened at the WICHE conference this last week. You all probably know I served for you as the higher ed seat on WICHE, 16-state Western Interstate Consortium on higher education, and one of the sort of lead minds that I think we've had in the state a few times, Dennis Jones, gave a report. He's the head of NCHEMS. Don't know what that stands for, but it's important. But he gave a delightful talk the last day of the conference on entitled "Between a Rock and a Hard Place," and that's sort of what we're talking about. This notion of tuition and the relationship to need-based aid, and ultimately the relationship to state funding. We're the outlier by a long shot. There are some other states that have tried to copy Montana in the last few years in terms of freezing tuition. There's even a few states now that are buying tuition down. But for the most part, 40-some states are continuing to reduce state funding into higher education budgets. And I think the point of his conversation was twofold. You know, we have all these national goals, whether it's Lumina goals or Obama administration goals or what, they're all targeting somewhere between 55 and 60% of the adult population with some kind of credentials, which is a significant increase from where we are. And I've often said, that's good, but you know, where do the resources come from to get there? And I think there's starting to become some reality that I don't know where those resources come from, because the likelihood of state increasing dramatically, state funds, with the exception of Montana, is low on a national conversation. In fact, extremely low. States are going the other way. Most institutions have kind of hit a plateau. I mean, I think in the last couple decades, there was quite a switch from state funding to tuition funding. I mean, that's my own opinion of it. But when you normalize the cost of education, it's pretty close to a price index. It may be slightly higher in some areas, but it's pretty close when you normalize it. So what's really happened, all the talk of tuition increases has largely come from lack of state funding has required tuition increases. But most states are starting to feel like there is just not a lot of room in tuition. We're getting to a value proposition. We're getting to that affordability place where it's just too big a bite out of family incomes to do that. So I think the crux of his talk was, so how do we get to that spot in the middle, and where's it going to come from? And the truth is the demographics across the country don't lend themselves well to what we're trying to do either. The baby boomers have effect on us in two ways: less kids coming into the system, and also the baby boomer population is pretty well educated. So as that group retires from the workforce, we've got an even bigger gap to fill as we try to meet those advanced goals. So we're losing, you know, some other countries, he mentioned Japan, that baby boomer age is about 10% educated. So when those drop out of the workforce, they're still educating at a lot higher rate. They're gaining ground on it. We're actually have a baby boomer generation that is highly educated, and those are going to hit us. So we're going to lose sort of ground on both ends, and where are we going to make that up? And I think that's really the relationship that we were talking about. The crux of the challenge there is nobody likes to talk about it a lot, but those with the most financial availability to them tend to do well in high school, tend to persist well in college. It is that group that is in the need-based aid that we're going to see, or going to need to see, a lot more production from if we're going to meet any of these goals, and how are we going to help that group? And that's really the balancing point that I think we're going to have to start to look at. The bottom line is most experts on this topic say, and this is hit some people wrong, but most people say it's going to have to come from how well we convert those students that we have. There's an article in the Billings Gazette today that speaks very highly of the tuition freeze and what it's done for Montana. The fact we've led the nation now from 2008 to 2015 in tuition increased restraints, something I think this board should be incredibly proud of and the state should be proud of. But the last line of that says we need to do more to graduate more students. Those students that come to us and enroll deserve the help that they need to get the degree that they came to us for. And I think, you know, that resonates deeply with me, because I think that's the case. I'm not talking about a degree farm. I'm talking about truly educating those students at a higher rate than we've been doing, retaining them at a higher rate, seeing them complete at a higher rate. It is that gap that we lose that is the only way we can hit any of these targets by most experts' opinions, and certainly mine. And so Kind of a fascinating talk. It ended up consuming most of one day, and along the way, some of the things we hit on is we're doing all that, and we're trying to do this in an era that the reporting guidelines, whether it's around Title IX or all the issues that face us, the compliance piece, the reporting piece, what we need to do for students, from mental health issues on down is requiring a lot more expense in that area than we've ever had before in the system, and complying with various directions are costing more than they ever have. And so how are we going to balance all that? I think a lot of highly regarded experts are scratching their head over this one, but I think it's one that we certainly need to look at. I think Regent Johnstone, to your point, is there's some choices that have been made along the way, and we're going to have to look at how those balance, including need-based aid, and how we as a campus, we do use a fair amount of waivers, but how are we going to help those most in need? And because they probably hold the keys to reaching some of these goals that we need to reach. And so, I think that sort of part of this discussion we've been having, and wanted to mention it now. Glad to answer any questions.
Regent Albrecht.
Chair Tuss, Commissioner Christian, with your involvement with WICHE, I'm curious about the issue that when we have the tuition freeze, and this is outstanding because this accessibility and affordability is so critical for our students. My other concern is making sure that we can retain and attract the best instructors, and that limits us, as we know, within our financial constraints. And we're fortunate that there was a pay plan included. But I'm curious with the other states how they address that and how we can look at that moving forward into future legislative sessions.
Yeah, I'm not sure they are. That's sort of the crux of the rock and the hard place, because you're exactly right. If we don't maintain the quality of the institutions, then we've served no one. And I think everybody recognizes that, and we know we need to do it. I think they're looking at various modalities for efficiency and other areas to where we can accomplish what we need to, including increased retention and completion without dramatically increasing the expenses along the way, and that's a broad array. But our budget's pretty straightforward. 3/4 of it goes to our people, and if we can't afford the people, we're at an incredible disadvantage. So that is the crux. I mean, I always felt like as a board member, that's the toughest piece we have to deal with. I mean, you've got to balance affordability. We know we've done a ton, but we also know that our per capita income in the state is low, and we still remain, for all the good that we've done, we still remain a pretty big bite out of family pockets in Montana, a bit above the regional average. And so there's work to do, and will continue to be, but we can't do it if we can't pay the faculty that we need to teach these students. So that's the crux. You've hit on it. I wish I had all the answers. I know we just need to remain focused on it and see if we can't find our way.
Additional questions on our legislative session overview from board members? Seeing none. Commissioner, do you want to roll into our enrollment report for fiscal year 15?
I want Tyler to just hit on a few more things from the legislature, maybe
sure.
explain, it's in the drill down there. I think I gave a high overview. There's a few things I'd like to touch on in a bit more detail, and then he can roll right into enrollment.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. Elizabeth, if you can click on that link. We have an outline here, and I'm not gonna, it's 3/4 of the way completed as far as being covered, and I don't want to be redundant. Although if we back up.
It's about as good as I ever do, by the way, 3/4.
If we back up, the first page covers tuition freeze. We've covered that extensively. The first half of that page is sort of a breakdown of what we had in the MOU with the governor, as well as our Education Appropriations Committee. If you scroll down just a hair there, Elizabeth, there's a funding chart there, and if you click on that link, you'll see basically what's at the heart of our operating budget is the presentation of the ed unit funding. You'll remember me saying that over and over again last September. And you can see the trajectory that we've been on going back to 1992. And that's sort of the fascinating history of funding for the university system in those years from 92 to 2004, where we actually did not increase our state funding by even $1. In fact, we lost $1 million in that 12-year period. And then from that point, actually from about 2006-07 onward, now 3 different biennium with tuition freezes, resulting in the 2016-17 biennium, reaching now at a total of $195 million in total state approach for the campuses. Scroll down just a hair there, you can see what that looks like when you divide that by the total number of resident student FTE that we have, so funding per student, and you get a glimpse at the effects of our appropriation mixed with the influence of our enrollment.
Those of you that weren't here at the time, that other spike in there that you see in the 7, 8, 9, that is the first tuition freeze that we did in the Schweitzer era, and then you can see the effect of the last 2.
These numbers aren't inflation adjusted, are they?
No, they are not.
If they were, what would it look like?
Mr. Chair, Regent John Stone, take that 1992 and make it $8,000. We have a chart actually from our operating budget presentation, and so you'll see a bathtub effect from 92 going through about 09, and then we see some pretty steady funding with the sharp increase in the last 4 years.
So on an inflation-adjusted basis, we're actually spending less today than we were then?
Yes.
Is that what you're telling me? Thank you.
All right, backing up just a hair there, Elizabeth. And so what we have here is really a kind of a roadmap for you how we're going to implement some of these action items that you have in front of you here for the next 2 days, and obviously performance funding is one of those. This afternoon in the Admin and Budget Committee, we have a presentation on performance funding, basically a request for action for the regents to approve the core model. And when and if you approve the attributes of that model, it'll drive the dollar amounts which allocate the $30 million. Actually, it's the first half of that $30 million for FY16 to the campuses. So this is the culmination, really, of 2 years' worth of work, although it's the second time, only the second time that we've allocated funds by performance funding. We started this work at the beginning of the last biennium and allocated funds in FY15, and we'll do so now for the second time in FY16. Scrolling down a hair there, so that puts tuition freeze, the attributes of it, sort of in the rearview mirror. If there's any other questions, I'd be glad to take those, but I believe a lot of those questions have already been aired. So I just put it in the bucket of system initiatives and overall funding increases outside of House Bill 2, about $24 million. The research initiative being the pinnacle of those funds are one of our primary legislative priorities going in for $15 million of one-time only funding to provide seed money for university system research and to expand our enterprise, connect it better to the economy of Montana, and in fact, as described by the Commissioner numerous times throughout the legislative session, solve a Montana problem, number one. Number two, create good Montana jobs. And three, influence the economy in growing areas that have not been tapped as of yet. So where are we at with this project? When it became clear about halfway through the session, at least to some of us, that these funds were coming, we knew we needed to start moving. Not unlike when in 2007, when we received $1.5 million to fix transferability. We knew we needed to get started, even when the session was occurring. Last legislative session, we received the funds for performance funding. We did the same thing. So in that name, we got moving in about April. As the Commissioner already indicated, we hired a new MUS research director in Janelle Booth. And at that time, pretty much simultaneously, we put together an RFP, very much in close coordination with the vice presidents of research and the chief research officers on each campus. We released that RFP to the faculty at the beginning of April, hoping to give them as much time to kind of collect their proposals. We've established a mechanism whereby those proposals rise on each campus to the vice presidents of research and the chief research officers. And on June 19th, we'll assemble a research advisory panel, which is actually dictated somewhat to us in House Bill 2 language of the membership of the folks who will provide recommendations ultimately to the commissioner and then to back to the Board of Regents, of course, and what programs we will fund at least initially with the $15 million. That research advisory panel is made up of 2 legislators, one from the Senate, one from the House. We're still in the process of compiling this group, very near the point where we could announce those members, and once we do, they will definitely be made public. In addition to that, we have a representative from both MSU and U of M. We anticipate that'll be the presidents of both of those campuses, along with the commissioner, and then 3 industry representatives, one representing kind of the major areas for each in which we described this research initiative going toward, and that is agriculture, natural resources, and biomedical/healthcare areas. As I stated, we'll have those members appointed and ready to roll very soon. June 19th is an exciting day for kind of the kickoff of this, and we hope by July 1 we have the dollars that are needed to get those projects rolling.
Tyler, how did we select those 3 areas? I mean, agriculture and natural resources, I guess, initially makes sense. I wonder about the third relative to what we're seeing in technology in the state of Montana.
Mr. Chair, Regent Johnstone, inside of those also is an area of technology. I'd really describe them as 5 areas actually. So add IT and computer science to that, but also include material science and manufacturing as well. How we came about those, I think they've evolved over the last 2 or 3 years of considering what a research initiative would look like, close consultation with the strengths of the campuses, advised to us from their leaders and definitely their vice presidents of research to kind of compile that core set of research that our campuses are directed at.
Thank you.
Further questions? Further questions? Thank you, Deputy Commissioner.
I'll just let you look through that list there. We've touched on a lot of these. I'd hit on the MUS agencies. This is an area that we haven't highlighted a lot, maybe after post-legislative sessions. They received a $5 million biennial increase above what they had in FY15. This is a good move and a really needed one for base funding in a lot of areas where we had patchwork agencies with either campus funds or OTO. So that was kind of an unsung but yet really important area. Elizabeth, if you could just scroll down a little bit there.
Hey, before we leave that, I did fail to mention the veterinary medicine, and I don't know if everybody recalls, in 2013 we started a joint program between us and Washington State University. So in the 13 session, we received sort of the go-ahead to do that and some startup funding, but we didn't have any students in it. So it seems like a small deal, but we didn't have the students to pay for, so the legislature couldn't fund it. So we went back, and that is the funding. It was basically had to be presented as a new proposal, and they funded that program now, and that will go into the base. And so that creates a lot of stability for that program moving forward and those 10 students.
Okay, scrolling down, you can read those other items there. Be happy to answer any questions if you have any on those. The Commissioner mentioned House Bill 403. That was our primary deferred maintenance building projects bill that actually did get passed, and the dollar amounts related there for those projects and some authority. And then that leaves us with other legislation, and this is, I don't want to say we spend the majority of our time during the session on this, but there's 200 of these bills that we sift through during the session, and these are the ones that either got passed or were tabled, but we really focused a lot of our time on. We called them priority ones. And I would be remiss without mentioning Senate Bill 29. It was our first bill that we came out for and supported as a university system. That was a priority one that got passed. And that bill basically, if I could talk candidly, righted an old wrong. And that old wrong was maybe not wrong when it first was created, but what it did is it established limits on the number and the amount of non-resident waivers that the university system could give out. It was from an era when the state actually appropriated funds for non-resident students. So there was an important kind of check and balance. It was before the university system was actually even created. And so we had some unwinding to do here because it was setting, I want to call them artificial limits on us and holding our feet to the fire with legislative audit in order at keeping us at a level where we could only give waivers to 2% of our total enrollment. And we had been exceeding that 2%. And we have had numerous conflicts with legislative audit as a result. And this was the time to fix this, although it seems like a kind of straightforward concept. There are a lot of opinions, we found out. We received excellent support from the legislature, particularly Senator Taylor Brown, who carried this bill for us all the way through and ultimately was passed at a very good rate by most of the members in both of the houses, although at one point in time it was defeated and had to be resurrected. We got that done, and we're happy to get by that.
Regent Krause?
Yeah, thank you for pointing this bill out. That's one that got me out of my chair when I saw it was defeated. I went, wait a minute. We have extremely good financial officers at our universities and at the commissioner's office, and they can calculate the area under the curve that maximizes revenue from out-of-state residents. And this old rule artificially tied their hands at maximizing revenue to subsidize in-state students. And now we're going to be able to turn them loose to do innovation. And, that's really, I really appreciate you guys going to bat for that and getting that done. And also all of the work that the financial officers put in on this bill too. So thank you very much for that. I had a question about something that wasn't on here, and I haven't understood how it worked, and maybe we take this offline, but 2 years ago we had some veterans facilities funding, and I know that doesn't appear to be continued as a separate item. One of the things it was used for was counseling, but it also created veteran centers at each of the campuses. Can you tell me how that's going to work going forward?
I don't know if I can tell you exactly, Regent Krause, how that's going to work. That was OTO funding to help us get those started. We did have some conversations along the way about continuing that funding, and they reminded us that was OTO money to get them started. And
yes, sir.
We needed to find a way to continue with those programs. So they weren't part of the, any addition to that or continuation of that was not part of the proposed budget, and ultimately never got introduced. The incredibly important things that have happened there, and I think they're doing some good things. We're having those discussions. We had one in Bozeman on Tuesday. Dean Wolf has had some great success with that, very concerned about it. I mean, I think as a system, we just need to look at that and see what we can do to continue those efforts moving forward, and I think in a sense, find a way to reallocate dollars where they make sense within our current budget structure. But there is no legislative funding for them.
No, okay, yeah, and it wasn't a criticism in any way.
No,
I
appreciate that.
Wanted to know how we're going to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Krause.
Mr. Chair, I'll continue on. As the Commissioner indicated, there's some attributes of the Montana STEM Scholarship that we could take just a second here to describe. This is an action item similar to the performance funding one that we need action by the board. This will occur tomorrow in the Academic and Student Affairs Committee that would basically enact the policy of the regions to allow the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education to administer this program. We are named in the bill as the administrators of this. And as a result, we've already taken some action that is needed, and I think it would help if I just kind of describe the intent of this bill and then where we're at with enacting that. This bill has a very strong purpose, and that purpose is to first prepare students to enter into STEM programs, incentivize them to actually declare their majors in STEM, and then incentivize them again to return for a second year, thus influencing our retention rates, with the ultimate goal of increasing the number of graduates that we produce in STEM areas for the Montana economy. It's a very measurable program and very specifically stated now in statute. The eligibility criteria look like this, and when I describe something that will look when it's fully funded. At the moment right now, we're still accumulating, and we'll be working on for the next couple of years, accumulating the revenue to fully enact this program, which I will explain in a moment. But the eligibility criteria are for any high school student who completes 4 years of math, 3 years of science, and earns a 3.25 is initially eligible for these scholarship dollars if they graduate from high school and immediately come to a Montana University System campus, one of the 3 community colleges, or a tribal college, and declare a major in a STEM or healthcare field. Believe it or not, some people don't believe that healthcare is a part of STEM, so we made it clear that this also includes healthcare. If they do that and enroll full-time in 15 credits, full-time's not 12 anymore, 15 credits, they will receive $1,000. If they complete 30 credits in that first year and still have a 3.0 and come back to one of those campuses that I specified and continue to major in one of those STEM or healthcare fields, they will receive $2,000. That's it. The program definitely has a potential, you could see, to carry it on to your junior and senior year. A lot of work was done on estimating the cost of this, given the flow of students from high school to college. What we came up with was that if this program has been enacted to where a student realizes and parents realize you need 4 years of math, so we're going to have to give it some time. Some of those students, obviously, this program wasn't around 4 years ago and may not have been on the trajectory that they needed to be in order to get out of high school what you needed to qualify. But once this program has matured, we would estimate there would be 1,000 students that would come to us. Roughly 1/4 of our new recent Montana residents that come to our institutions would qualify. And then a certain portion of those would come back for a second year, and that would create an overall cost to run the program of $3 million. And so that $3 million is proposed to come to us from a new source, and that's actually not a new source. It's just a new source for the university system, or actually for education in general, and that's the lotto. And the mechanism works like this. The lotto would be capped. The net revenue from the lotto would be capped at its current level right now. And anything above that comes to a special revenue account to the commissioner's office that accumulates those funds to apply toward this program. In the first year, before that revenue is even generated, we have $400,000 to get the ball rolling on this. Is it enough to fully fund everybody who comes to us this year? We hope so. We didn't have a lot of time to get the word out about the program. We definitely wanted to do it before high schools graduated their senior class. So we got to moving during the session. Prior to you approving the policy, it was determined we needed to act. And we've created a website. We've sent the website with the criteria, an online application that goes out to all high schools through their high school counselors. That's been disseminated now for about, I'd say, 10 days. Students will have until July 15th to get their information sent to us that they need to, so we can identify that they are enrolled in the university system, and then later check to make sure that they've declared a STEM major and have the qualifications they need from high school. So I'm going to stop there and give the board a chance to ask questions. I've covered a fair distance on this. There are some more details, but I think for this over hierarchical or higher level discussion, that's probably enough. Again, we have a chance to touch upon the detailed policy attributes in tomorrow's meeting of Academic and Student Affairs.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Further questions from the board? Seeing none.
Okay, if we could just scroll down one more page, I'm done. And I'm not positive that we need to talk about any of these, actually, just to take a look at what we have left here, as these were our most of our priority one bills. I believe that the commissioner has already touched upon a couple of the key ones that got tabled there. We have Senate Bill 168, which asks us to provide academic protection for students called to active duty, basically releasing them and ensuring that any progress they had made towards a class can be counted later, picked up on, that grades earned are carried forward. And we spent a lot of time talking with the sponsor and the legislature about this bill, and really feel confident that our campuses are already leading the way in what we need to do here. But it was an encouragement by the legislature for us to ensure that our academic policies are taking care of those active duty, those called to active duty. I guess I'd stop there and give you all a chance to ask any questions, and if not, I think that would conclude my report.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say one of the things that we did this year is on our website, we've posted some links in those legislators that supported us and those that didn't. I think it's important for the MUS to know some people went to bat for us to make this happen. And it's important that we recognize those and support those. Some very key players believe in education, they believe in what we're doing, and they supported us to the end, and it made a lot of this possible, and what happened and what didn't happen. And I certainly want to thank those legislative partners for all they did and the efforts that they put forward, oftentimes sticking their neck out within their own party or across party lines to see the university system funded. And I truly appreciate that and the relationships that we built with them and the support that they gave us. I'd also like to just end by saying, Regent Krause has mentioned this a couple of times, but the amount of hours and manpower across the system that goes into a legislative session is truly incredible. I mean, with almost every one of these bills, certainly all of ours and many others, from just some random reporting requirement at a state level that maybe influences or impacts us. We have to do fiscal notes on all that. I mean, they literally track the several thousand bills and do notes on hundreds, and from the campuses to our fiscal department staff throughout. Amy, Elizabeth track every one of the bills that is presented in terms of even those that are legislative intent are tracked by our office. And so incredible amount of work, incredible amount of man-hours that go into it. And just want to thank everybody in the system for what I think was an incredibly good session for the university system. So thank you.
That effort certainly doesn't go unnoticed by this board, so thank everybody who was involved in that. Additional questions from this board? It doesn't sound like there is, so are you prepared to move to the next item, Commissioner?
Tyler's prepared to move to the next item, I believe.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we have for you the FY15 enrollment report. Elizabeth, if you could click on that link here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, as I know we've got to keep the agenda moving, but an important topic nonetheless. And I always like to take a 10-year look at what's just the overall effect here to get a feel for what's happened in the university system. And going back to 05 through 08, you see the years, and it keeps, you could probably go 7 or 8 more years of the flat enrollment era. And then we picked up in 08 through 2012, a good portion of that being the recession, the inverse relationship between the recession and enrollment in higher education is seen there. We also had yet to reach the point where we started to decline in high school, natural decline of high school students as a result of baby boomers' kids not having as many kids. And so this natural effect, which is seen in almost every other state, is often amplified in smaller states, and that's where we're at. And so you take the last 3 years, and you can see the declines we've had there, just sort of steadily moving down at a rate about 1.5% per year. There's breakdowns for this enrollment throughout. We can split it and slice it and dice it 100 different ways. The look at resident students is obviously the one that the legislature takes. At a point in time, we had a formula that ran on resident student FTE. I think as a result of that, we've focused a lot of our attention on residents, but I also think that this era of declining enrollments begs that we look at non-residents even more now, as that we're dependent upon their tuition revenue. And so in a 1-year period here, you can see pretty much what's happened over the last 10 years to a degree, not a declining degree with the resident students, but we've taken a pretty good hit there with our resident undergraduates, and we've buoyed it a little bit with the non-resident student. Sliding down one more, you can give you a comparison of a 2005 to a 2015 to see what has happened there. And I guess a general statement would be is that we've been flat on resident students. We've gone through a period of time where we've gone up quite considerably with residents, and now we're back to where we began in 2005. The non-resident students have steadily increased, and as I indicated, are an important part of our business model. Sliding down one more. We can buzz through these, but you can group them as community colleges, 2-year colleges, and 4-year colleges, and see the trend there that's occurred from 05 to 15. One more slide. The distribution of the FTE and the shifts that have occurred. One more slide. A close look at resident FTE by those campus types.
Tyler, have you done any analysis of what's causing the changes in enrollment between and among campuses? Is it a product of curriculum, location?
Mr. Chair, Regent Johnstone, we've done a lot of looking at that, particularly with our 2-year education initiative that started in about 2008. And we've focused quite extensively on programs dedicated to improving the enrollment of 2-year campuses, the dual credit programs, our distance learning focus, the remedial education move from the 4-year campus to the 2-year campus. I think we could go on to name, credit for prior learning, a whole host of really focused initiatives, I believe have fueled that enrollment over the past, I don't know if it was started in 05, but definitely by 08, we were up and running with public statements that this is the priority of the Regents, and the end result is to hopefully shift some of those enrollments from our 4-year campus to our 2-year campuses. So I believe that is a product of it. It gets, in the last couple of years, a little bit muddied as the economy has kicked back in, and some of those students who were looking to us to improve their employment are finding employment right now, and that particularly affects the 2-year colleges. So in that regard, absolutely. when it comes down to individual programs and curriculum that might be approved, let's say in the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, the campuses are the ones that really take the lead in the assessment and their enrollment management and the influence of those program enrollments to a degree where the system office has taken less of an active role in that type of analysis.
Regent Williams.
I actually realized I'm a slide ahead, so I'll wait till you get there and see
Okay,
if
well,
you
let's
answer
get
my
there.
questions.
Non-resident FTE by campus. Regent Williams?
I was just looking at the really sort of drastic change. It seems like a small number change in the 2-year colleges over 10 years for non-resident students. I'm curious, is that, it seems to me that may be new programming that's attractive to out-of-state students. Do we have any sort of sense of what's causing that really drastic shift of bringing in non-resident students to the 2-year colleges?
Mr. Chair, Regent Williams, I believe part of it is an increase in WUIs, that's the Western Undergraduate Exchange, that have been awarded at 2-year campuses. I think it probably would, given that we have 8 2-year colleges or 9 2-year colleges involved in this roll-up here, it would probably vary by campus. I also would like to believe that it's the increased in mission of some of these campuses and the viability of getting your first 2 years of education to a 4-year degree there at a lower cost, and that would particularly influence non-resident students. I see President Karras reaching for her microphone, so I'm confident that she's going to weigh in on a portion of this.
President Karras.
Mr. Chairman, Regent Williams, one of the things is a 2-year community college, especially our focus is on meeting our local needs. So we don't do a lot of recruiting out of state or even out of our region for students, although we do have a number of students. But at Flathead Valley Community College, for example, about 94% of our students come from Flathead and Lincoln counties because that's our main focus as a locally supported community college. So we don't recruit a great deal out of it, although we have a few niche programs that would bring in or attract out-of-state students, and certainly our location may bring in some. We don't have housing, nor do many of the other 2-year colleges. So I would say, and I can't speak for all the other 2-year colleges and community colleges, but certainly our focus isn't on recruiting non-resident students.
So moving forward, the next couple of slides are by campus, year to year, and then by campus, 10-year growth. We'll stop real quickly there on the projections for high school graduates. We get our projections from WICHE, the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education. And I don't want to say they struggle to keep up with the actual, but if you look at just recently in the last couple of years, they've underprojected the number of students that we actually received. There's no escape of the fact, though, if you went back to the 08 year and compared it to where we're at, we're down 1,000 high school students. This has occurred over year. So when we look at higher education, it takes a 4-year cohort of students to fully load what you would have as an effect from your high school graduates. And when those graduates have decreased year over year, you have fewer come in, you have fewer return for retention, and it's a compounding effect that we are 1 year away from pretty much fully realizing the overall influence of our high school graduates. Our system in particular is influenced greatly by our high school graduates. If you take a look at other states, and particularly a reason for in growing our 2-year system, other states have a higher percentage of non-traditional students engaged. We're working toward improving that, but at the moment we are still very dependent on these recent high school graduates. The next couple slides look to address that in different ways by looking at head count of new resident students. You see the compounding effect of the declines I want to point out, this isn't because we are capturing a smaller percent of the high school graduates. In fact, this last fall, we were at a higher percentage of capture rate than we were in the 4 previous years. It's just the compounded effect of declines that are now being pretty much fully realized. The next slide is dual enrollment. We're trying to buffer, and we have. These students definitely count towards our FTE. We've grown that. It's almost doubled since spring of 2012. It's something you really need to look at on an academic year basis as it changes slightly from fall to spring, given the attributes of our individual campuses and how dual enrollment is offered. One more slide, and then I'll get out of here. Well, those are the summary points, and I'm not going to reiterate those. I'd leave those for you there to read. Mr. Chair, members of the board, that concludes the enrollment report.
Are there questions on the enrollment report from the board? Seeing none. Thank you. Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, I think we've hit in other what I wanted to hit in other. The campus reports are listed there for you to read through. If there's any questions on the campus reports, we'd be glad to answer those or ask the campuses to answer them. Otherwise, I believe that concludes the commissioner and system reports.
Other questions from the board? I don't think there are. Thank you, Commissioner. We are now at the bewitching hour. We're actually a little bit ahead of time. On the agenda, you will note that it indicates that the board is convening for an executive session. We're now going to convene an executive session to discuss personnel matters. As chair, I have determined that the individual right to privacy on those matters outweigh the public's right to know. And for board members, the executive session will take place in room 202. And so we will be back at the call of the chair approximately 1/2 hour. Thank you.